Hey everybody! Korakhan here, and this is my review of Thor Ragnarok. I'm really sorry that I'm late on this review. Been a crazy week for me. But anyway, this movie is directed by Taika Waititi and is starring Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Tom Hiddleston, Cate Blanchett, Tessa Thompson, Jeff Goldblum, Idris Elba, and Karl Urban. We've got a large cast, and for the most part, I think all of them did a very good job, and we'll get into their characters a little later. This is going to be a spoiler-free review, so the things that I would cover you would have seen in the trailers. If you haven't seen the trailers and you want to see this movie without anything, don't watch this. Go watch the movie, come back, and we'll go through the review. But if you've seen the trailers, that's the most spoiler I will get. So the story takes place with Thor losing his hammer, Mjolnir, and having to become a prisoner for Jeff Goldblum's character, the Grandmaster, and having to go and battle Hulk, and then their adventures of getting out of there. Now, it's a very colorful movie and a really fun movie, and that's a word you're going to hear all over the place, that it's a fun movie. And that's because it is. I mean, it's hard to come up with another word that best describes the film. You know, a lot of people scoff at me or anyone else saying that it was fun. It's like, what do you mean by fun? Well, go watch it. You'll know what I'm talking about. You come out of the movie and you're like, you know, I had a really good time. I had a lot of fun. That was a fun movie. It was a blast. I had a smile from ear to ear. I was laughing through the whole thing. The action was cool. There were a couple of things with the action, but I'll get into that. And just overall, the best Thor movie by far. Better than the first two films. But I think you needed the first two films for this one to work. If you just started off with this movie, I don't think it would work as well. And part of it is because the first two movies had more of a serious Thor film. The first Thor movie, which was directed by Kenneth Branagh, who's better known for doing more literature, you know, he does a lot of Shakespeare films. He's doing and starring in the new Murder on the Orient Express. So he is much more of a literature and character, like epic character-driven kind of storylines. And so when he did the first Thor, it had very much of that kind of feel to it, where you had the king and the sun and things that you would have Shakespearean elements for. And it worked really well for that movie, I thought. The second movie wasn't good. It's watchable, but it's not that good. And you needed that kind of serious setup for the character, so that, and they had little peppers of humor in that first movie and a little bit more in the second movie, but you needed the serious character to grow into this more humorous. He's not a joke of himself, but he's kind of lightened up. Now we got a stepping stone to the humor we see in this movie when we had the Avengers come out. Then you had the digital shorts of Thor with his roommate, and like of what he was doing during Civil War, you know, because he wasn't in Civil War, and some of the behind the scenes and the extra footage. And in the Avengers, they had some humorous moments with Thor as well. And so it built up to what we got in this movie, and I really think we needed that. This movie had a very 80s feel to it. Not that it was referencing the 1980s, but that it could have been made in the 1980s if technology allowed it to. Down to the fonts from Thor and Ragnarok on all of the posters and marketing. The music, which was done by Mark Mothersbaugh, who's from Devo. He was in the band Devo, but he's been doing scores and music for TV shows and movies for a long time. I mean, I first remember seeing his name during Rugrats. He did the theme for Rugrats, and I used to love that show. And I would see his name up there all the time. I thought it was a weird name. But he did the music, and it was very synthetic and 80s feel to it, and I love that. It complemented and fit the overall style of the film, which also added to some of the humor that they were going for. Now let's get into some of our characters. Chris Hemsworth as Thor. He's done it enough times now. He pretty much is Thor, and you can feel that he really embraced the character and made it his own humor-wise throughout this film. They did something different from everything else they've done before, like I said, but they had peppers of humor in the other movies and digital shorts that led up to this, so it made sense. He did a great job as Thor. I really liked his interactions with all the other characters, and he did even pull off the emotional aspects as well. So he did the humor and the drama of the movie very well. It was a Thor performance that I was expecting and I got. Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. When he was the Hulk, he had a motion capture suit on and also did the voice for the Hulk, which they, changed in post a little bit to make it grainier, but he did do the motions and the voice for Hulk. So he is both characters. It wasn't totally animated. And he did a great job as Hulk. I loved hearing Hulk being able to talk. He did not change back to Bruce Banner after the last Avengers movie and stayed that way for about 2 years. So his speech is more of like what you would learn after 2 years of not talking or barely talking. The only lines he really had in the other movies were like Hulk smash and puny god, that kind of thing. So he's got more of a vocabulary now, and he jokes around with Thor, and his relationship with Tessa Thompson's character, Valkyrie, I really liked that. I liked their playful nature. It was great. So Hulk became a much more powerful character, I think, because you have more of an emotional connection to Hulk when he's the Hulk. He's not just this big ragey monster. He has an intelligence about him that you actually care about him. You not that you want to protect him, but you don't want to see him come to harm because you have a little bit more love for the guy. I like the fact that Mark Ruffalo played Bruce Banner and the Hulk. It would have been very easy to get someone else to do the motion capture suit or to have someone else do the voice, that Hulk would be a different character. But when having Mark do both, you get a nice synchronicity between the characters and how they interact with the other characters. So the way that Mark interacts with Thor as Bruce Banner is a little different than how he interacts with Thor as Hulk. However, it still feels like it's the same person, just different personalities of that person, if that makes sense. So from my point of view, when I was watching it, I could see elements of Mark during Hulk and elements of Mark during Bruce Banner, and the combining of the two really fit together. And I loved that. I loved the way that he played both characters and how he played them close enough to where you could still feel that it was the same person, just two different personalities. Tom Hiddleston as Loki is Loki. I mean, he's the same character he's been in the other movies. However, they did make him a little bit more likable in this movie. Like in Avengers, I mean, he basically was trying to destroy the planet. So, not the greatest guy ever. I mean, he is a good villain and one of the only villainous characters that are consistent throughout all the films. Marvel has a problem of throwaway villains where you have just a villain that's in one movie. They're not that strong. It's basically just there to service your heroes' characters developing more, but your villain doesn't really have much to do, or they're kind of throwaway. But Loki is not. He's reoccurable. He's likable. You kind of root for him, hoping that he'll become good and do good, but he eventually goes to bad or makes a bad decision again. And I mean, he's a lovable but hateable character. You love to hate him, you hate to love him, that kind of thing. But he does a great job as Loki, and I always like seeing him on screen, especially his interactions with Thor. I like the relationship between the brothers. That kind of go back and forth where they love each other, but they can't really be around each other that much. Like, they don't support each other's decisions, but they still love them. It's family. I like that dynamic of the two characters. You don't get that too much in some of the other Marvel movies. It is unique to the Thor storyline. So I love Loki. Tom Hiddleston does a great job. Cate Blanchett as Hela. Oh my gosh, I love her as Hela. She was awesome. Love Cate Blanchett. She was so menacing in this movie. I mean, just the fact that she destroys Mjolnir with almost no effort, and just her presence. She's such a strong presence. She was the perfect casting for this character. Super sexy and smooth, like the way that she moved and walked around is very sensual but dangerous. The way she did everything in the movie, she was very sensual and horrific at the same time. You just couldn't stop watching her. The downfall is the way that they wrote the character. She felt disconnected from the rest of the movie, even though she kind of had to be because of the story they told. But I would have liked more interaction between her and the rest of the cast. She did kind of feel like a throwaway villain, but I would love to see more of her. I hope she pops up in future movies. I would love to see her come up in Infinity War. I don't want her to go away. I don't want this to just be the only movie she's in, because she did a great job as Hela. Now, they did change the character a little bit. In the comic books, she's the daughter of Loki, and in this movie she's the firstborn daughter of Odin, and so she's actually the older sister to Thor and Loki. I didn't think that change was that big of a deal. I know there's a lot of comic lovers that don't like anything that changes from the comic books, but I mean, you gotta sometimes, and you can't really make her Loki's daughter. It doesn't work for this storyline, and I love what they did with her, so I'm fine with the fact that they changed her character to be Odin's daughter, because the way that they did that and what they did with it, I really liked. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, loved her. Awesome. It's really difficult for a new character to come into a movie with some established characters and still shine. And she did. She's shined just as much as everyone else in the film, and her character was well developed. She did a great job with her character, and it fit the movie so well. I really hope to see more of her as well. I want her to pop up in other movies, and I would not be opposed to seeing a movie of just her, about her storyline. They get into some of her origin in this movie. I won't go too deep into that, but I would like to see that movie that they talk about. I would love to see that. Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster is the guy that runs the planet, or runs the games that are on this planet. And his character is actually the brother of Benicio del Toro's The Collector from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Jeff Goldblum was an awesome choice. He was the perfect Jeff Goldblum awkwardness that I love. And they hired him specifically to be Jeff Goldblum, and he gave it to us. I mean, he gave us pure, unfiltered Jeff Goldblum, and I loved it.
Now listen to that. He's threatening me. Hey, Sparkles, here's the deal. If you want to get back to Asperg.
Asgard!
I like the decision of getting an actor that has an odd, normal personality and putting them in the movie. The only other actor I can think of that could play an interesting Grandmaster by bringing his own weirdness to it would be Christopher Walken. I think he would do a really good version as well. Maybe not today because he's getting up there in years, but a younger version of Christopher Walken, like around the late 90s, early 2000s, I think would have been an awesome choice as well. But Jeff Goldblum killed it. I loved him as Grandmaster, and again, I want to see more of him in the future, and I'd like to see him and Benicio del Toro get together so we can see the brothers back and forth. I would love to see some great banter and back and forth between the Grandmaster and the Collector. That would be awesome. Idris Elba as Heimdall, back again for the character. Now, in the other two movies, he doesn't do very much. But in this movie, his character gets a little bit more depth, and I love that because I'm a big fan of Idris Elba. I want him to play Bond. I was a big proponent for that. And so to see more of him in this movie made me very happy. We don't get a huge amount. I mean, we've got a lot of characters that are going all over the place, but we get more than we did in the other films. And I just love seeing Idris Elba on screen. So he does a great Heimdall, and I like what they did with him in the movie. Karl Urban as Scourge. Now, this character kind of surprised me a little bit. When I saw the trailers, I thought he was just going to be some kind of throwaway henchman that was in the background behind Hela, and that would be it. They got him because he's a recognizable name, but I didn't really think they needed him. They didn't need Karl Urban to play Scourge from the trailers that I saw. But in the movie, no, they did. They needed him to play Scourge. They gave him a little bit more, but they needed somebody that could take that and draw it and pull it to a character that we want to see. And he does a good job with that. He does a good job with taking a little bit of screen time and a little bit of this and that and turning it into a memorable character. I liked what they did with Scourge, and Karl Urban really took advantage of that entire character arc, and I like that. I like what they did with him, and I like what he did with it. And finally, my favorite character, if you haven't noticed from the thumbnail, Korg.
You rode a hammer.
No, I didn't ride that.
The hammer rode you on your back.
No. I used to spin it really fast, and it would pull me off the...
Oh my God! The hammer pulled you off.
the ground. It would pull me off the ground up into the air, and I would fly.
Some of you are like, who the hell's Korg?
Sounds like you had a pretty special and intimate relationship with this hammer, and that losing it was almost comparable to losing a loved one.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Korg is a really funny blue rock alien. They established in the previous Thor movies, it's that race of rock guys you saw in the beginning of the second Thor movie where he breaks the guy up with Mjolnir and everything. It's the same race. But in this, he plays one of the gladiators that befriends Thor. Now, he's voiced by Taika Waititi, the director. It is awesome. I would love to watch a movie of just Korg. Just give me Korg's story. I'll just follow Korg around. To me, he's kind of like the R2-D2 of this universe. You know, he's a side character, but you love to see him. He may not do too much, but you just love seeing him every time. I mean, of course, R2-D2 does basically save everybody, and Star Wars would not exist without R2-D2. But my point is, a smaller character that doesn't do too much, but you just love him every time he speaks or does anything. I love Korg. I love him so much. I want a movie of just Korg. The action scenes were great. However, I did kind of have some problems with it. The thing is, this is a superhero movie. It's a comic book movie. It's over the top. It's fantastical. So it's not like you can just do a martial art film where you pull the camera back and have a wide shot of a fight sequence. It doesn't quite work. And what they were doing in this one is to make less edits and have longer shots is they would have CGI transitions between shots to make it look like one long shot. It was noticeable, but not too distracting. So I enjoyed that, but it was a little odd. Kind of like the sequel for The Kingsman. They did a lot of that. However, it didn't work as well in The Kingsman. It does work pretty well in this because they don't do it all the time. And they only do it, like a handful of times. But it's noticeable. However, it does extend the fight sequence and the action sequence without doing too many edits. and the camera is not shaking. So I liked the action. It was engaging. The fight between Thor and Hulk was great. It was everything you would want to see from being a kid reading the comic books. They did it on screen and it worked. I loved it. So the action was good. Some of the CGI elements didn't work quite as well for me. But again, I was having so much fun in the movie that I didn't care. The reviewer part of my brain noticed all of those little details, but the fanboy in me, or the having fun child element of my brain, was like, who cares? Wee! So, you know, the action could have been a little better, but I don't care. I had fun. It was awesome to watch. So I really loved it. When it comes to the directing and cinematography, Taika Waititi did a great job of directing this film. I don't remember who the cinematographer was, but whoever they got did a really good job with their lighting and camera setup. All of the camera movements, the way it was placed, looked great. Looked like every frame looked like you could have froze it and made it a poster. So cinematography looked good. The directing really surprised me because there's a lot of improv and ad-libbing in this film, which for some movies is easy to do. You know, there's some movies that are just the entire movie is one big ad-lib. There pretty much is not a script. But with this, you have a very structured story that you need to get in. You have your character arcs. Everything has to be done right. But what Taika Waititi did is, for every scene, he knew where he needed to start, where he needed to end, and what beats they needed to hit, and then would let the actors kind of play with their dialogue and ad-lib and improv during that scene. So as long as they got to the point they needed to be, it was okay with him. And I like that he was able to just compartmentalize those scenes to allow the actors to do as much playing as they could in the scene itself. So then when you put them all together, it works. Obviously, there was probably a lot of time in editing because they probably had a whole lot of takes for every scene. However, it turned out great. And the banter was awesome. The dialogue was great. Their interactions with each other really did feel like improv. And so I loved the way that worked, and Taika Waititi did a great job of assembling that. So to wrap up, I had a lot of fun. The characters were great. Acting was good. I wish Hela had a little bit more to do with the other characters in the film. She did feel a little disconnected, and some of the action scenes, although used CGI elements to extend the edit, I didn't think it was bad, not as bad as the sequel to Kingsman, because they didn't overdo it. I had so much fun. Super funny, laughed the whole time. Action was great. The dramatic elements that they had in there hit home perfectly fine, and I loved it. I loved the movie. I'm going to give Thor Ragnarok a grade of an A. But what did you guys think? Did you see Thor Ragnarok? Comment below, let me know your thoughts on this. What did you like? What did you not like? Let's keep it civil down there. Let's have a nice discussion. So comment below, let me know your thoughts. Also in the description below, I've got links to all of my social media, Mailbox, Patreon, all kinds of stuff. There's a bunch of things down there. So check out the description and click on all that other stuff. If you're on VidMe, upvote this, give me a follow and share it around. And if you're on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. And I will see you on the next video.